I didn't wake up one morning certain my marriage was broken. It crept in slowly, like a crack you don't notice until the wall starts to lean. For months my husband Evan had been off. Not cruel. Not distant in the obvious ways. If anything, he was too careful. Too polite. The kind of attentive that feels rehearsed. His phone never left his hand anymore. When it buzzed, he'd flip it face down. When I entered a room, conversations ended mid-sentence. I told myself I was being dramatic. We'd been married 5 years. People settled into routines. Mystery didn't always mean betrayal. But lies have a smell to them. And once you notice it, you can't stop breathing it in. The night everything shifted, Evan told me he was heading to his best friend Mark's place. "Just a few beers," he said, kissing my forehead. "Don't wait up." He nodded. Mile. Said nothing. Mark had been posting photos from Greece all week. I sat on the couch long after the door closed, staring at the quiet house. Then I did something I had never done before. I opened my phone and checked Evan's location. I told myself it was just to quiet my nerves. The dot wasn't anywhere near Mark's neighborhood. It was at a bar downtown. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys. The bar was dim, loud, full of laughter and clinking glasses. I scanned faces, telling myself I was ridiculous, until I saw him. Evan sat in the far corner booth, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. Across from him was a woman. They shared a beer between them, leaning close, laughing like they had inside jokes. The way he looked at her made my chest cave in. It wasn't desire exactly. It was familiarity, comfort, something intimate that didn't belong to me. My breath caught. I must have made a sound because Evan's head turned slightly. Panic surged through me. I ducked behind a nearby table, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he'd hear it. But he wasn't looking for me. He waved down a waitress, smiling, ordering another round. I left before my legs gave out. At home, I crawled into bed fully dressed and cried into my pillow until exhaustion dragged me under. When the front door opened around 2 in the morning, I pretended to sleep. Evan stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. He collapsed beside me, mumbling an apology for waking me, brushing a kiss against my forehead. "Had fun at Mark's?" I asked softly, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "Yeah," he said easily. "Great night." The lie slid out of him without hesitation. Barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile, heard his laugh, felt something inside me fracture. Morning came with the smell of bacon and coffee. On the nightstand sat a tray. Eggs, toast, a strip of bacon placed carefully beside a folded napkin. Written in chocolate syrup were the words, "Happy anniversary, my love." I stared at it, stunned. Evan appeared in the doorway, freshly showered, smiling like the husband I thought I knew. "Morning," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Pulled away. "I know you're cheating on me," I said. His smile faltered, then disappeared completely. "What?" he asked, as if I'd spoken another language. I told him everything. A bar. The woman. The light. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not a nervous chuckle. A full, breathless laugh that doubled him over. Something inside me snapped. "How dare you?" I whispered. "Sit down," he said between gasps. "Please. Just let me explain." I didn't want to hear it. But I sat. And that was the moment my life took a turn I never could have imagined. Because the woman I thought had destroyed my marriage was about to walk back into my life and change everything I thought I knew about love. Evan wiped his eyes, still catching his breath from laughing, and immediately looked ashamed when he saw my expression. "I'm not laughing at you," he said quickly. "I swear. I didn't think you'd ever find out like this." That sentence alone should have ended us. "Find out what?" I demanded. "That you're seeing someone else. That you're lying to my face." "No," he said, shaking his head. "That I met her at all." My stomach dropped. "So you admit it?" "Yes. I met her," he said slowly. "But not for the reason you think." He asked me if I remembered the Italian restaurant downtown, the one with the brick walls and live music on weekends. The place where, months earlier, he'd gotten unusually drunk and talked for hours about his childhood, about his mother, about things he normally kept buried. He nodded. That night, he said, I told you about my sister. I remembered. Barely. A vague story about a sibling who had been sent away when they were kids. A name I'd forgotten. A sadness I hadn't known how to respond to. Her name is Jill, Evan said. And she's the woman you saw at the bar. I laughed then. Disbelieving. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything, he replied quietly. But it's the truth. He told me the story I'd never fully heard. How his mother, struggling to survive, had sent Jill to live with an aunt in another state when they were still children. How money ran out. How phone calls stopped. How life swallowed the gap between them until it felt impossible to cross. Years passed. Then one day, Evan received a message from a stranger on social media. Same last name. Same birth city. Same questions no random woman would ask. They talked for weeks. Compared memories. Family details. Stories only siblings could share. When they finally decided to meet, Evan panicked. I didn't know how to tell you, he admitted. What if it went badly? What if she wasn't who she said she was? I didn't want to bring chaos into our lives unless I was sure. So you lied, I said flatly. Yes, he replied. And I'm sorry. Sorry didn't erase the image of him laughing with another woman while I sat at home spiraling. Still, pieces began to click together in ways I hated. I demanded proof. He handed me his phone without hesitation. Messages. Long conversations filled with cautious excitement. Old photos exchanged. Questions about their mother. About childhood homes. Nothing flirtatious. Nothing hidden. My anger dulled, replaced by something heavier. Confusion. How do you know she's really your sister? Yes. She showed me her ID, he said. Same last name. Same birth date range. Same parents listed. I leaned back against the couch, exhausted. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry from relief. But a deeper part, one I didn't want to acknowledge, was still unsettled. I want to meet her, I said. Evan nodded immediately. Of course. But the timing was inconvenient. It was our anniversary. We already had plans. A couple's massage dinner at one of our favorite places. Jill suggested meeting afterward instead. I agreed, though my chest felt tight all day. The spa was quiet and calming, the kind of place meant to soften rough edges. Evan relaxed quickly. I didn't. Even as hands worked tension from my shoulders, my mind replayed the bar scene again and again. On the drive home, Evan tried to make small talk. I responded when I had to. Nodded. Smiled when appropriate. At home, I stood in front of my closet far too long, choosing between a black dress and a wine-colored one. Picked the black. Neutral. Controlled. Dinner was fine. I laughed when expected. Slowly. Tried to convince myself the knot in my stomach was nothing. Then Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. It's Jill. Does she know I'm coming? Yes. He hesitated. No. I didn't think. That's interesting, I cut in. You didn't think to mention your wife. He apologized again, but the damage was done. I paid the bill myself and walked out ahead of him. The bar was louder than I remembered. Jill was already there, seated confidently, chatting with the bartender. 2 shots waited in front of her. She turned when we approached. Her smile faltered when she saw me. Evan introduced us. Jill, this is my wife. She stood, offered her hand. It's really nice to finally meet you. Her voice was warm. Her eyes were kind. And against my will, something inside me softened. Talk. We drank. We laughed. And slowly, horrifyingly, I realized I liked her. Because the woman I'd feared would steal my husband was becoming someone I couldn't stop thinking about. And that was only the beginning. By the end of the night, my nerves had eased in a way I didn't expect. Jill wasn't cold or awkward or territorial. She was funny. Disarmingly so. She listened when I spoke, really listened, and asked questions that felt thoughtful instead of polite. When we hugged goodbye outside the bar, it felt natural. Too natural. On the drive home, Evan was almost giddy. "I can't believe this," he kept saying. "The two most important women in my life getting along." I stared out the window, watching streetlights blur past. I told myself the tightness in my chest was leftover stress. Nothing more. The next morning, Evan suggested we see Jill again, help her plan her move. She was staying in a hotel nearby, her belongings still across the country. Instead of driving back and forth, Evan offered to hire movers. I agreed without hesitation. That should have been my first warning sign. Within weeks, Jill moved in. She took the guest room, but quickly filled the house with energy it hadn't had in years. Music while cooking. Laughter in the hallway. Conversations that lasted longer than planned. Evan returned to work, and the house became ours during the day. We shopped together, got our nails done, tried new cafes and shared bites of each other's meals. Jill told me stories about her childhood, what it was like growing up without her brother, without answers. I told her things I hadn't even told Evan. About my fears. About how lonely I'd felt in my own marriage before I ever suspected betrayal. She never judged. She never rushed to fix me. She just stayed present. One night at dinner, Evan asked her how she liked living with us. Jill looked at me before answering. "I have everything I need right here," she said, smiling. I laughed it off. Evan seemed pleased. But something shifted after that. Evan worked late more often. Jill and I filled the silence. We watched movies curled at opposite ends of the couch that slowly became closer. We shared blankets, shared inside jokes, shared glances that lingered a beat too long. I noticed myself caring more about how I looked when she was around, laughing harder, feeling lighter. I told myself it was friendship, relief, gratitude. But late at night, lying beside my husband, my thoughts drifted elsewhere. I imagined Jill's laugh, her warmth, the way she looked at me like I was interesting, not just familiar. The thoughts scared me, so I buried them. Until I couldn't. One afternoon after another long shopping trip, we stopped at a quiet restaurant. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust dancing in the air. We talked about nothing until the food arrived. Then, heart-pounding, I asked, "Do you like me?" She laughed. "Of course I do." "No," I said softly. "I mean, do you like me?" The laughter faded. Jill studied my face carefully. Then she reached across the table, lifting my chin gently, and kissed me. It was brief, certain, intentional. "Does that answer your question?" she asked. My world tilted. We didn't talk about labels or consequences. We agreed silently to keep it quiet, to be careful. But restraint didn't last long. When Evan left for work, Jill and I gravitated toward each other like gravity had shifted inside the house. We told ourselves it was temporary, a mistake, something that would fade. Instead, it deepened. We found excuses to touch, to linger, to share moments that felt stolen but intoxicating. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Weeks passed, then months. Evan noticed the change in me. Cooked more, smiled more, seemed happier. He thought it was the house feeling whole again. One afternoon we chose the living room. We were careless. The front door opened. Time froze. Evan stood there, briefcase slipping from his hand, eyes wide with disbelief. "What is this?" he whispered. We had no answer. Jill wrapped a sheet around herself and followed him down the hall as he shouted. I heard words break, accusations, years of loss spilling out. Then he turned on me. "You're my wife," he cried. "How could you do this? With her?" I told him I was in love. The next day, divorce papers arrived. Because losing my husband wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far more complicated and far more irreversible. The divorce didn't happen all at once. It unfolded in pieces. Silent mornings, separate bedrooms, conversations that felt like walking through glass. Evan moved out within a week. Jill stayed. I asked her once if that was strange for her. She shrugged and said, "Life doesn't wait for perfect timing." I wasn't sure if that was wisdom or denial. Evan stopped speaking to both of us. Messages went unanswered. Calls went straight to voicemail. When we did finally sit across from each other in a lawyer's office, he looked like a stranger. "Hello, Kemp." Angry in a way that felt heavy instead of explosive. "You destroyed my family," he said to me once quietly. I didn't argue. The papers were signed. The house stayed with me. Evan took what little he wanted and disappeared from my daily life. When it was over, I expected relief. What I felt instead was guilt, thick and lingering. Jill tried to be my anchor. She moved into my room, cooked dinners, held me when I cried in the dark. She told me love wasn't neat, that sometimes it arrived wearing the wrong face. I wanted to believe her. We officially became a couple after the divorce finalized. No secrecy, no stolen moments. We went on real dates, held hands in public, built routines that felt easy. She landed a nursing job nearby. I supported her interviews. We celebrated her first paycheck with cheap wine and takeout on the floor. From the outside, it probably looked like a clean transition. Inside, it was anything but. Some nights, I dreamed of Evan standing in the doorway, asking me how I could smile after breaking him. I woke up with my heart racing, Jill's arm around me, whispering that it was over, that we deserved happiness. But happiness built on ruins has sharp edges. The divorce didn't happen all at once. It unfolded in pieces. Silent mornings, separate bedrooms, conversations that felt like walking through glass. Evan moved out within a week. Jill stayed. I asked her once if that was strange for her. She shrugged and said, "Life doesn't wait for perfect timing." I wasn't sure if that was wisdom or denial. Evan stopped speaking to both of us. Messages went unanswered. Calls went straight to voicemail. When we did finally sit across from each other in a lawyer's office, he looked like a stranger. "Hello, Kemp." Angry in a way that felt heavy instead of explosive. "You destroyed my family," he said to me once quietly. I didn't argue. The papers were signed. The house stayed with me. Evan took what little he wanted and disappeared from my daily life. When it was over, I expected relief. What I felt instead was guilt, thick and lingering. Jill tried to be my anchor. She moved into my room, cooked dinners, held me when I cried in the dark. She told me love wasn't neat, that sometimes it arrived wearing the wrong face. I wanted to believe her. We officially became a couple after the divorce finalized. No secrecy, no stolen moments. We went on real dates, held hands in public, built routines that felt easy. She landed a nursing job nearby. I supported her interviews. We celebrated her first paycheck with cheap wine and takeout on the floor. From the outside, it probably looked like a clean transition. Inside, it was anything but. Some nights, I dreamed of Evan standing in the doorway, asking me how I could smile after breaking him. I woke up with my heart racing, Jill's arm around me, whispering that it was over, that we deserved happiness. But happiness built on ruins has sharp edges. We ran into Evan once at the grocery store. His eyes met mine, then slid away as if I were a ghost. Jill squeezed my hand. I didn't know whether to feel comforted or exposed. Over time, the guilt dulled. Routine replaced regret. Jill and I settled into something that felt solid, loving, real. And yet, I started to notice things. How quickly Jill dismissed conversations about the past. How she redirected whenever I mentioned Evan. How she laughed off questions about her plans, her long-term goals. I told myself it didn't matter. We were happy now. One night, months later, Jill came home late. Said the hospital was understaffed. She kissed my cheek, distracted, phone buzzing in her pocket. The smell of a bar clung to her jacket. My chest tightened, not with certainty, but with familiarity. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to become the person I used to be. But the doubt stayed. I found myself checking the clock, watching her expressions, wondering what parts of her I didn't know yet. Love, I realized, doesn't erase patterns, just changes their shape. Because the story I thought ended with a divorce was quietly setting up one final truth. And this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. I didn't confront Jill right away. I told myself I was projecting old wounds onto a new relationship. That mistrust was a habit I hadn't unlearned yet. But habits don't make your stomach sink for no reason. Days passed, then weeks. Jill remained affectionate, attentive in the ways that counted, distant in the ways that didn't. She smiled easily, avoided deeper conversations just as easily. One evening, while folding laundry, her phone buzzed on the bed beside me. I wasn't trying to look. I truly wasn't. But the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize and a message that read, "Last night was fun. Same place again." My hands went cold. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until Jill walked in, cheerful, talking about her shift like nothing in the world had shifted. That night, I asked her a simple question. "Are you happy?" She hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. "Yes," she said. "Aren't you?" He nodded. Late. The next morning, I made coffee and waited for her to leave for work. Then I packed a small bag and drove aimlessly until I ended up at a park across town. I sat on a bench and let the silence settle. For the first time since everything began, I stopped asking what other people wanted from me. I asked what I wanted. I realized something uncomfortable. I had fallen in love with Jill during a time when I felt invisible in my marriage. She had seen me when I felt unseen. But that didn't mean she was my destination. That evening when she came home, I told her everything. The message, the doubt, the exhaustion of never feeling fully secure. She didn't deny it. She sighed and sat beside me. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "But I don't stay in places where I feel tied down." The words were calm, honest, final. I nodded, strangely relieved. We didn't fight. We didn't cry much. We acknowledged what we had been to each other, real but temporary. She moved out 2 weeks later. Took only what belonged to her. The house went quiet again. This time the silence didn't feel like punishment. Felt like space. Months later, I ran into Evan at a cafe. He looked better. Healthier. We spoke briefly. Apologized where we could. Forgave where it mattered. We didn't rekindle anything. We didn't need to. I went home alone that night and realized something simple and grounding. Love that begins in confusion will always ask you to lose yourself to keep it. And I was finally done doing that. Because sometimes the biggest twist isn't who you fall in love with, but who you choose to walk away from, including the version of yourself you almost became.